Every year, American anglers spend billions of dollars chasing the same fish in boats that couldn't be more different in price and barely different in performance. That gap has a name in this industry, even if nobody says it out loud at the dealership. Call it the reputation tax. Almost every serious offshore buyer has paid it at least once without ever realizing what they were actually buying. Today, we're naming the 7 brands where that tax runs the highest and breaking down exactly what your money is going toward when you sign for one of them. This is not an attack on any of these builders. Every boat on this list is genuinely excellent, built by people who know exactly what they're doing and have the track record to prove it. The question was never whether they deserve respect. It's whether the price still matches what that respect is actually worth in dollars, or whether somewhere along the way the brand quietly outgrew the boat underneath it. By the time we reach the name at the very top of this list, you'll understand something most buyers never figure out until it's already too late. In offshore boating, the real damage was never done by a bad boat. It's done by a great one you overpaid for, without ever realizing that's exactly what happened. Let's get started. Number 7. Boston Whaler. Decades ago, Whaler cut a boat in half in front of an audience just to prove it wouldn't sink. That stunt outlived almost everyone who saw it happen, and it's still doing work for the company today. Ask a dealer why people pay what they pay for one of these, and the word unsinkable comes up before anything else. It's baked into how the brand talks about itself, and it's baked into the price, except that trick isn't really a trick anymore. Foam-filled hulls with genuine positive flotation are common now. Several other builders meet the same standard Whaler made famous, using similar construction and similar materials in similar places on the boat. The thing that used to set it apart from everyone else on the water is just normal at this point. The price never really caught up to that shift. You're still paying like it's 1985 for a feature that's now table stakes across most of the offshore center console market. What you do still get is a dealer network that's genuinely hard to match and resale that holds up better than most brands in this category. There's real money in both of those. The first time something breaks 200 miles from home on a Saturday and you need a part fast instead of waiting 3 weeks, you'll understand exactly what that network is worth. That's a legitimate reason to pay more. It's just not the same reason the unsinkable pitch is selling you, and most buyers never separate the two. There's also a quieter benefit here that rarely comes up in the sales pitch. Whaler owners tend to keep their boats a long time, which means the used market stays smaller and tighter than you'd expect. And that scarcity props resale up almost as much as the reputation does. If you want the name, the history, a boat you'll hand down eventually, that's a real reason to buy one, and nobody should talk you out of it. If you just want the fishing capability without paying for a party trick from decades ago, Robilo builds a hull with comparable flotation for a lot less money, and most owners couldn't tell you the difference on the water. Number 6. Grady-White. Talk to a broker about Grady-White owners and you'll notice something. They almost never leave. Not for a faster hull, not for something flashier at the next boat show. The company has stayed privately owned for generations, and it shows in small ways. The gel coat, the hinges, the way the cabin is actually put together instead of assembled to hit a price point. People notice that kind of thing, even if they can't always explain why they trust the boat as much as they do. It's a genuinely comfortable, well-built boat and a family-friendly one first. It is not, most days, going to be the sharpest hull in a building sea compared to boats designed purely around offshore fishing. And that's fine, honestly, because most Grady owners aren't running 80 miles out before sunrise chasing a bite window. They're taking the kids out on a Sunday, or fishing when the forecast actually cooperates, and coming home dry either way. A good chunk of the price tag is paying for a cabin that matters a lot to a family, and considerably less to a hardcore angler who just wants deck space and a dry ride. Warranty claims stay low year after year, which quietly saves owners money nobody ever brings up at the dock. And it shortens the time the boat spends sitting at the dealer instead of on the water. There's a reason that matters more than it sounds like it should. A boat in the shop is a boat you're not fishing, and over a decade of ownership, fewer trips to the service department adds up to real fishing days you'd otherwise lose. That's the part of the premium that's easy to overlook and genuinely hard to put a number on until you've lived through the alternative. Pursuit builds a few hours away, and gets close on fit and finish for meaningfully less, if that's the trade you'd rather make. And plenty of buyers never notice the difference once they're actually out on the water with a rod in hand and the sun coming up over the transom. If you're enjoying this breakdown, take a second to like the video, subscribe to Boat Verdict, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future buyer guides and reviews. Number 5. Everglades. Ask a marine surveyor which brand's inspection reports come back cleanest, and Everglades gets mentioned constantly. That's not an accident. The company built its whole identity around foam-filled construction and sealed, recessed hardware, hull work done alongside naval architects instead of guesswork. It reads like an engineering thesis, and buyers respond to that kind of story because it sounds like proof rather than a slogan on a brochure. Here's the thing, though. It performs well in rough water, genuinely well. Just not so much better than a couple of competitors running similar deep V designs for considerably less that the gap makes obvious sense once you actually put the numbers side by side. The sealed hardware is real, and it matters, but mostly 15 years from now, when there's less corrosion sitting in places you can't easily inspect without pulling the boat apart. That's a future benefit you're paying for today, in full, upfront, and it's easy to overpay for something that far out on the horizon. The company also leans hard on its pod drive option, which genuinely does make docking easier for a lot of owners, especially anyone running the boat solo or in a tight marina. That's a real, everyday convenience, not a marketing invention, and for some buyers, it's worth almost as much as the hull underneath it. Where the math gets fuzzier is resale. Everglades holds value respectably, helped by a loyal owner base that rarely trades down, but it doesn't command the same premium at resale that some of the brands further up this list do, which matters if getting your money back out someday is part of the plan. Sailfish runs a similarly aggressive hull and gets similar marks from owners for a lot less money. This is one of those cases where you want actual sea trial numbers in front of you before you buy, not the brochure language about naval architects and sealed compartments. Take one out on a genuinely rough afternoon yourself, back to back if you can manage it, and let the ride tell you what the spec sheet won't. Number 4. Regulator. There's a sound a Regulator makes hitting afternoon chop that other boats don't quite make. Less of a slap, more of a clean cut. Captains notice it on the first ride, and more than a few of them end up buying the brand a second time because of it years later, even after telling themselves they'd shop around next time. That part of the reputation is earned honestly. What's less obvious is that Regulator keeps production limited on purpose. Fewer boats built means longer wait lists, which means stronger demand, which means the resale numbers stay strong, no matter what the used market is doing elsewhere in the industry. That's smart business, but it's a decision made in a boardroom, not a decision made in the hull design. SeaVee builds with a similarly sharp entry and gets you close to the same ride without the weight or the price bump that comes with it. Resale is where this one actually pays for itself, though. Hold the boat a few years and sell it, and you get back more of that original premium than you would with an average performer in the same class. That part is real money, not just brand loyalty talking, and it shows up clearly if you compare listing prices for 5-year-old boats side by side. There's also the wait list itself to consider, which most buyers underestimate. Ordering new can mean a wait measured in months, sometimes longer depending on configuration, and that delay is its own kind of cost if you're trying to fish a specific season. Some buyers end up paying a premium on the used market just to skip the line entirely, which tells you something about how far this dynamic has traveled from the hull itself. It's just worth knowing that some of what you paid on day one was never really about how the boat handles a following sea, and everything to do with how few of them exist. That's not a knock on the boat. It's just a different thing to be paying for than most buyers think they're paying for when they sign. Number 3. SeaHunter. Ask a serious tournament guy which boat he'd never sell, and this name comes up constantly. No cup holders to speak of, no air conditioning, nothing extra. Built in Miami for people who fish hard and genuinely don't care about anything else on the boat. That restraint built something most brands can't buy their way into, actual loyalty from people who could afford any boat on this list and chose this one anyway, year after year, without much debate. It's also, honestly, a little bit of a club. Compare it against other fishing-focused builders, and the price runs ahead of the actual performance gap between them. You're paying to belong to something as much as you're paying for the hull underneath you, and there's nothing wrong with that if you know it's what's happening. Talk to owners for long enough, and a pattern shows up. Almost none of them bought the boat for a single stat on a spec sheet. They bought it because someone they respected on the docks owned one first. And that kind of word of mouth carries more weight in this world than any advertisement ever could. It's slower to build than a marketing campaign, and it's a lot harder to fake, which is exactly why it holds up. The trade-off shows up more in daily comfort than in fishing performance. Long runs get louder and rougher than they would on a boat built with more insulation and creature comforts in mind. And that's a real cost for anyone who spends whole days aboard rather than a few hours chasing a bite window before heading home. Cape Horn does something similar, with less of a following behind it and more of the price going straight into the boat itself, which is worth a look if the badge matters less to you than what's under it. Resale inside that tight circle of buyers stays strong, but step outside it and the pool of interested buyers narrows fast. Selling to someone who isn't already part of that culture can take longer and cost more in the end than the sticker price ever suggested it would. Number 2, Contender. Before Contender built fishing boats, it built race boats. And you can still feel that history in the hull today. Homestead, Florida. Offshore powerboat racing. Real competition against real boats, not a marketing department deciding somewhere along the way that the brand needed a racing story to tell after the fact. For someone who actually runs long distances at speed, that heritage means something real once conditions turn ugly out there. Most owners, though, are not doing that most weekends. It's a little like buying a sports car for a commute that never leaves third gear. The capability is genuinely there. It's just rarely the reason anyone actually uses the boat on an average Saturday. It burns more fuel doing it too, which adds up quietly over years in a way that's easy to ignore on the day you sign for the boat, and hard to ignore 5 years later when you're totaling up what a season on the water actually cost. Freeman gets you comparable performance at speed for less money per foot, if the racing pedigree itself isn't really the point for you. There's a maintenance side to this too that doesn't get talked about much. Boats built to run hard and fast tend to work their hardware harder, which can mean more frequent service on things like steering systems and running gear than a boat that spends most of its life cruising at a moderate pace. None of that is a defect. It's just what happens when a hull is engineered around a capability most owners rarely call on. Talk to a mechanic who services both kinds of boats and they'll usually tell you the same thing without much hesitation. The boats that get run hardest aren't always the ones built for it. Sometimes they're just the ones whose owners never stop to ask whether they needed that much boat in the first place, or whether it just felt good to own it. There's no shame in the second answer. It just costs more every single year you keep the boat, whether you ever run it flat out again or not. Number 1, Yellowfin. A boat idles into the marina during a big tournament and conversation just stops. That reaction tells you more about this brand than any spec sheet ever could. Tarpon Springs, Florida. Somewhere along the way, Yellowfin stopped being just a very good fishing boat and became something closer to what a certain Swiss watch brand is in another world entirely. Owning one says something about you before you've even backed it off the trailer, and that message is priced directly into the boat. Resale is where it really shows up. These hold value better than almost anything else on this list, and that alone keeps demand high, which keeps resale high, and around it goes, feeding itself year after year without much outside interference. It works, and it's genuinely hard to argue with something that just works, no matter how it got there in the first place. But take the name off for a second. Compare the ride, the fishability, the actual hull underneath the paint job, against a few competitors costing considerably less, and the gap between them shrinks a lot faster than the price gap does. A good part of what you're buying, if you're being honest about it, is what other people think when they see it pull up at the dock and recognize it instantly. Dealers will tell you, off the record, that a fair number of buyers never once ask about dead rise or fuel burn during the sale. They ask about the wait list, and they ask what color other owners at their marina already have, so they don't end up matching. That's not a criticism. It's just a different kind of shopping than most of the other boats on this list involve. Every boat here earned its reputation the hard way. That was never really in question. What's worth asking before you sign anything is how much of the number on the sticker is actually the boat, and how much of it is just what people think about the boat when they see it. Sometimes that's genuinely worth paying for. Sometimes it isn't. Most buyers never even stop to ask which one it is. The smartest boat purchase isn't the one that impresses people at the dock. It's the one that keeps proving its worth every time you leave it. Thanks for watching. Let us know in the comments which one surprised you and which boat you think we got wrong. If you haven't already, subscribe to Boat Verdict for more honest, evidence-based boat buying breakdowns. See you in the next one.